All right, so for our next piece, we're going to veer back into Beethoven. We've been doing Mozart for the last little bit. We're going to switch back, and it should feel kind of like a bit of a real gear shift because Beethoven and Mozart, I hope you're getting the impression, have such a different voice. You know, we think of them together because not only because they're two of the most prominent composers, but they were living in the same town. You know, they're both sort of Viennese composers. And they're linked together because of a common language, but it's easy to forget just how different from one another they are. And so I hope these are giving you a window into that. So switching back into Beethoven, obviously we want to be focusing on the technique here. We're going to be going through the exposition of this G major sonata in this video, and then we're going to talk through the development section separately. But aside from the technical things, I do want you to be thinking about style, thinking about voice, because with Mozart, we've spent so much of our time focused on the way that he uses and the way that he crafts these gorgeous, singable, lush, lyric melodies. And that's such a hallmark of the Mozart style, the Mozart voice. With Beethoven here, it's so very different. And so with this piece in particular, you know, you should have already listened to it. So again, if you have not yet listened to this sonata in G major, go back and do it. Because it should strike you right away that a Beethoven melody, I'm going to put melody in quotes, you can kind of grunt a Beethoven melody. You know, and this one in particular, I think is one of the most, I think it's not a melody, it's an idea. And with this one, you can just sort of like mutter a Beethoven melody. And I love that. I think, you know, there's such power to a music that is connected to a very sort of guttural experience. But so this is one of Beethoven's great grunting melodies. But so let's get in here and let's talk through the exposition. I'm really hoping this is now the fourth sonata that we've done beyond the Haydn ones at first. So I'm hoping that you are feeling very comfortable finding the elements of an exposition on your own. So let's just talk through this one and see if my analysis lines up with yours. We'll talk about things to notice. So here we go. So here's our main theme, and again, this very gruntable kind of beginning. I just love da 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 da, right, with the little chords. Right, it's just so lovely, and then he moves it up. Right, so very different than a Mozart melody for sure. So let's think. Where do we think this ends? Where does this main theme come to a close? Because it obviously begins in measure 1. So let's write that down. So main theme is measure 1 through, well, we don't really know yet. So as we sort of follow it, like I said, right, repeats the melody, or repeats the main motive, up a step, sort of a mini sequential statement, you know, related to development technique. And I'm hoping that you hear that crazy jump from D to C, that ninth. Right? Because remember, how do we know when we've ended the main theme? When we get a cadence in the home key. And so here, oops, I was in the wrong text box. So here we've got an authentic cadence in G major, which is the home key. Authentic cadence in G major right here on measure 8. So this is a very, very standard length main theme. 8 measures long. Very, very typical. The thing that I want to point out, this was an easy main theme to locate, hopefully. You sort of heard that cadence there. The thing that I do want to point out about this main theme, though, is Beethoven is being very, very playful with the meter, with the time signature, with the rhythm here. So when you hear this, I think one of the good exercises with this piece is to just listen to the beginning with your eyes closed and sort of clap where you would feel the downbeat, where you think the measure starts, because it starts with pickup. So don't look for a second. Just listen and tell me where you think the downbeat is. Well, I think it feels like the downbeat is right here. I'll show you. Right there, where the chord comes in. And then he does it again. But that's not where the downbeat is. The downbeat, I'll put the chord in the actual right place of the downbeat. Right? It's very different than we expect. And that's a little game that Beethoven is kind of playing with us so that we can actually follow that. And there's a lot of spots, especially in the exposition here, where we're just off. We're off the meter by a bit. And I think that continues all the way through this main theme. If we look in like measure 5, 6, 7 here, after the statements, oops, after those, when we get to the right here, with this 16th, 8th, 16th syncopation, look again at where the chords come in. They're on the 16th later. And so it can sort of sometimes feel like the beat is not where it is. And I find that it makes this cadence sometimes, if I let my mind slip and I'm not counting, it can make the cadence feel like it comes a little early. So instead of this main theme having a strong sense of finality like we would often expect with a big authentic cadence 8 measures in, it has a little bit of a slight jolt to it. And then going here into the transition, we get back onto the beat. So I think this is a really interesting Beethoven main theme because in some ways, the arrival at the transition with this really straightforward melodic thing, there's a very standard Alberti bass in the left hand. That almost feels like the arrival at the first melodic statement of the piece. It's certainly more traditionally melodic than the main theme, which is that muttering thing and is off the beat. It's kind of interesting. So anyway, main theme 1 to 8, authentic cadence, and then we get into the transition here. We're in the home key. So the transition's starting here in measure 9. And I would say definitely more of a typical melodic concept to the transition melody at first, at least. But it does still kind of have that slight Beethoven mutter sound to it, where he uses this repeated note and then comes right back to it. I really love that. It's almost like he says it and then kind of leaves a little bit of space. No, I really mean it. You know, like sort of ask nice once, could you please do the dishes? Now please do the, you know, it's sort of like you say it again. I really wasn't asking that politely. And that's, again, sort of this muttering thing. And I think we get a sense of Beethoven kind of getting stuck a little bit here. So that's the transition. If we're going along, sort of repeating this idea, and remember, we're in G major, so we want to be looking for motion to D major, which we kind of get pretty soon here. So we've got our little melodies. And then here, and then there's our C sharp, you know, so, and then we're off. Right. So Beethoven does this really well where he moves us into D major, but he doesn't let the line die. He doesn't immediately cadence. So here's our motion. Here's our motion into D. So I'm just going to sort of write, we're in D major at this point. But remember, the transition isn't over when we first get to D major. We only end the transition when we get a cadence in this new secondary key. So we're in D, but we have not yet arrived at a cadence. And here Beethoven sort of really, if you look at the right hand, latches onto this syncopated idea. Right? So a lot of syncopation, kind of playing with that off the beat idea. And if we look back to the main theme, can we see where Beethoven's getting that syncopation idea from? What's this material right at the end of the main theme? So we've got this 16th, 8th syncopation. Oops. this little syncopated thing, this idea. So I'm just going to put a little rectangle around that so that we notice that that's related. And that's kind of where some of this transition material is coming from. So I'm going to just put a rectangle here so that we catch that relationship. And I think that's really an important thing. And Beethoven kind of latches onto that for a long bit of this. So just to look at the sketch really quickly, if we're here in the main theme, straightforward progression, just not really much to mention here other than this jumping thing, some chords. Here's my little, very tiny little sketch of the dotted or the syncopated rhythm. And then in the transition, we've got this repeated note idea, and we've rhythmically augmented the syncopated rhythm. So it was 16th, 8th, 16th in measure 7, but here in measure 14, we get 8th, quarter, 8th. We can see our motion into D major, but we're not done with the transition yet. So let's come back over here. This is, again, one of these things where Beethoven's getting stuck. He just is stuck on this idea, the syncopated idea. Here's measure 20. And then he kind of gets distracted a bit, but then gets stuck on that. Right? And then just sort of is off to the races. And if we look in 24, right, it's just this 25, this sort of exasperated moment. So if we look, it's not abundantly clear that there's a cadence here, but if we follow the harmony, we've been in D major, just sort of doing some nice chromatic motion, right? G sharp leading us to A. A, of course, should be important because it's 5 of D. Right? So here, if you look at the left hand, what's been going on starting in measure 19? A, A. We've got sort of a dominant pedal in D major. So I'm just going to write that down. We've kind of got 5 of D dominant pedal going on for from measure 19. And then at 24, Beethoven lets the left hand stop. The right hand gets stuck. And then just lays this out. And this is a pretty clear indication that we're in D major. We're here on 5 D major, and the motion has stopped. So we're going to consider this a half cadence in D major. Let's write down half cadence, and I'm going to put it in the middle of the staff here. Half cadence in D major. You always want to be on the lookout for spots where the harmonic motion stops. I know the melodic or the right-hand material here continues, but nothing's really happening, right? We're not going anywhere. It's just this sort of chromatic, scaly material. And then here again, this idea, Beethoven just gets stuck with this repeated note idea. And that's something, too, that we've seen before, right? Where is that coming from? Bum, 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 bum. Well, it's the beginning of the transition, right? When we were back at the very beginning of the transition, what did we have? This repeated note idea, right? And so Beethoven is borrowing that here at the end of the transition to lead us into the secondary key area. So we're here. The transition goes from measure 9 to measure 24. We get a little half cadence in D major. We remind ourselves of the beginning of the transition, and then we're off into ska 1 here. All right, so here's ska 1, and that's measure 25. All right, so that's the first page. Again, the transition, not much to really look at here, but I think it's really important to notice the ways that Beethoven is reusing rhythmic ideas from the main theme and motivic ideas from the transition. Kind of coming back, get a nice little half cadence on 24. Now we're into the ska section. Beethoven does this a lot, where the ska kind of, in some ways, just feels like it comes out of nowhere, right? Not surprising out of nowhere, but like it just starts, right? We're sort of stuck on this, and then we're off, right? And that's sort of our starting idea of ska 1. We can see in 30 here, he responds in the dominant, right? Just going down. And then here in 33, we have what kind of sounds like maybe a new idea. But again, nothing's happening. And then look, it just continues. And then same thing going on here. So this is really a story of Beethoven getting stuck a little bit. You might hear this spot and think maybe this is something new because we're not doing the we're not doing that downwards descending thing. But we really can't say that this is any kind of cadence to speak of. And while, yes, it's kind of new, I don't think this is enough to really consider anything. My hand really wants to play a D sharp for some reason. Right? And then we do it again. Dun, dee, da, da. And so we're just kind of stuck. And what happens when Beethoven gets stuck? Repeated notes. Right? We're always coming back to that repeated note idea. It's not really what I wanted, but I'm going to leave it there because you never know when you might need a little text box. Here's another repeated note idea, hearkening back to stuff we've heard before. Come on. There we go. Repeated note idea. But this time, when he's stuck, Beethoven gets out of it, and we have this really flashy finger stuff at 41. 30-second notes galore. And this is an interesting spot because this is another example of where the flurry of activity in the right hand can make this feel like it's a new idea, right? It can feel like we've broken out, we have the repeated notes, and then, right, we're off to the races. But look at the harmony. We've been just hanging out on this sort of pedal tone. But we're not going anywhere because here's D major. We're in D major. So that's 1, 4. That's not the beginning of a new idea, right? So I have a text box. Let me use my text box here. We're on 4. And then we get this chord after it. G sharp, B, D, F natural. What's that doing in D major? G sharp is leading to A. And that's a diminished chord. So this is a 7, fully diminished 7 of 5. So again, the right hand might make you think there's something new happening. But check the harmony, and a lot of the time you can see that it's very typical progression. 4, 7 of 5. And what do we get here? Cadential 6, 4. Right? Got A on the bottom, 5, 6, 4. Let's draw some dashes. Oh, look at that. Auto dash. Got some dashes. And then 44 here. Right? Sort of get the continuation of our cadential 6, 4. Right here's 5, 6, 4 to 7 to 1. We might think, okay, is that the cadence? Well, no, it's not, because what does Beethoven do? Just does it again right here. So but does it down an octave. And a lot of the time in spots like this, when you have a little idea that sounds like it's going to be the cadence, and then it's done again in a different register, this is the real cadence, because following this, after sort of slightly new idea here, but no harmonic information to confirm that we've gone anywhere, let's get stuck on that for a while, get our little stuck notes, fast notes with the harmony, right? And then here's our resolution, fast notes, right? And then we get our, and look here at 47. Now there's a new idea, right? We've got a new idea. Mario theme for the first time there. So ska 1 comes to a cadence here, and 47, so this is an authentic cadence. And so again, that's just a good example of how you can use the harmonic information to parse your way through what's going on. So here's ska 1, 25 to 47. Use the harmonic information to clarify what's going on thematically if there's not enough there to convince you. So let's go back to the chart. Coming down here for ska 1. Again, the repeated note idea, but then there's nothing really happening for a lot of this. It's just Beethoven getting stuck, and then finally we get our cadential 6, whatever the notes are, right there. And we're into ska 2, starting right here. That's 47. This would be another example, just people like to bring these up, so I'll mention it again. This would be another example of an elided cadence, right? So I'll just put in parentheses here, or in bracket, yeah, parentheses, elided cadence. And remember, what that means is the first note of the new idea is the last note of the previous idea. So we're cadence, we don't do this. Right, we don't stop. It sort of goes through, right, do all that. Right, it just goes right on. And if we look, as I said, we get through the little Mario thing down here in 52. Right? And we can sort of see, again, there's no stopping here until we get to the end of the exposition. There's no little cadences in here. And in fact, look, we can kind of see we've got a dominant pedal point here at the end, while Beethoven is just sort of luxuriating on this. And here's one last little moment where Beethoven is kind of pushing the rhythmic pulse off the beat a bit before getting to this really lovely cadence with a pedal point there at the end. So ska 2, 47 through 63 ends with an authentic cadence here. Nice authentic cadence on a 1 chord in D major. And then we'll be off into the development. So that's what's going on here. Again, this is sort of one of these unique pieces. Not super unique, but it's notable. There's only 2 ska sections, and we can really tell that because there are not any cadences to separate what's going on, and we don't have the kind of very strong thematic, melodic, motivic material that we would get in, say, a Mozart piece to tell us much. But we do have this really... I really love this melodic idea. And I think it's nice that Beethoven often lets these super singable melodies wait until we're deep into the exposition, right? And then here at 58, when everything's already done. I mean, just... sort of just a little teaser there at the end. So that's the exposition to this piece. We'll get into the development together, but make sure you look through that. See if you can find pre-core, core, sequences as they're standing on the dominant, all that fun stuff.